Alright, here's part one. This is going to be a two-part video. I figured that'd be the best way to do this. So, in the biggest in-tank pump we have to date, right, is the 295, F90,000 295. I know the bare pump flows 525 liters per hour. And then I know the PPRV and the siphon dump, I lose performance. One from the PPRV restriction and then the controlled dump out the siphon. To create suction, I lose flow. So what I'm going to do in here is I'm going to test through 20 to 70 psi and 10 psi increments, amperage and flow, installed in a hat. And this is a return style hat that I do. So in this one, the PPRV is already deleted because we don't need it. So I've already removed that restriction. Now, what this test is going to do is I'm going to record all that data and see how much flow throughout that pressure operating range I'm losing via the siphon dump, right? So the outlet of the pump on here comes out and then it has to tee. One side goes to the pump outlet, the other side comes through this nozzle and creates the venturi suction, right? So I'm going to record all the values in here, and then at the end of this video, I'm going to test the aftermarket siphon with the different size venturi nozzles and find out which one I can run. There's like a medium. This one I know. This one's for the supply side, so I can't use this one. But the overall goal here is I want to see if I can delete the supply side siphon, regain that performance, and then on a return kit, right, have a return line coming back in. This aftermarket siphon is designed to be able to run your return line. So there's a couple things I'm going to test at the end. One, I'm going to physically make sure I have suction still. I have a little jar that I'm going to use, and to make this as accurate as I can, I literally have a OEM siphon tube out of an 05 to 10 Mustang tank. So I'm going to hook the siphon up to the hose up to this aftermarket siphon, and I'm going to put it in there and see if I can actually suck fuel with it with these different nozzles. Because this pumps around 500 liters per hour, I think I'm going to just start with the medium-sized nozzle, right? And I want to make sure that this doesn't restrict the return so much. That's why I'm going to test flow down to 20 psi. Or if I'm using a 40-pound base pressure under decel, if I have 20 inches of vac, right, I'm going to be down to around 30 psi. But I want to test it down to 20 just to make sure that this restriction on the return isn't going to affect the operation of my regulator, if that makes sense. All right, so without further ado, let's start some testing. So for now, I'm just going to go ahead and install it as it is. It's still, like I said, it has, the pump is installed. It's a fully built, this would be like ready to go in a car. So the PPRV is deleted. I'm going to see how much flow I'm losing via that venturi siphon dump. It would help if I put it on the right side, huh? That's my return fitting. This will probably be the best way to put it in here. Snap that up. Go ahead and drop this assembly in. Turn it on. Well, on top if I plug the pump in, huh? What am I doing today? I'm out of my mind. Alright. Power's plugged in. Turn it on. And again, so you can see that's how much flow and pressure, right? The pump's having to work at a higher pressure to compensate for that flow loss. So I'm losing flow in the outlet of my system. I'm losing pump performance. So I wanna find out how much. Right. Alright. And I'm not gonna show you all the amperage and numbers, right? I'm gonna set you down and I'm gonna record all the data. Get this done as fast as I can. Alright. So I'm gonna dial it down to 20 psi first. Alright, 20 psi. What are my numbers? $17 amps, 17.1, and my flow is 2.3. Go up to 30. Flow is 2.1. It's bouncing to 2.2. We'll call it 2.1. Amperage is 18.1. Go up to 40. .0, and then 18.7. 50. It's bouncing from 1.8 to 1.9, so I like to use it halfway, 1.85, and then at 19.4. 60 psi. 1.7, 1.8, so bouncing. 20.1. And all the way up to 70 psi. .6 and 21.2. Alright, so there are my before numbers. I will calculate those to gallons or liters per hour real quick. So 2.3 times 125, 522 liters per hour. 477. 454. 420. 398. 364. All right. So there are my numbers for flow. So how hard I can tell you, operating on this style hat with the PPRV, I saw a negligible amount of loss, right? It's actually pretty good for my bare pump testing. But let's remove that siphon. In my part two video, I'm going to remove the siphon and compare all these flow numbers, right? But for now, we can put that away. Now it's just going to be the actual test of, I'm going to put this on the return line and make sure it doesn't affect the flow and make sure it functions. So like I said, based on that flow rate, I'm going to choose their medium nozzle, right? Let's put that in. And these are all O-ring ports. I don't need no tools. And then I have a adapter that accepts the OEM tube, right? And I'll use my little adapter here. And I'm going to plumb this guy into my return line. Why she's leaking? Don't care. This is just going to be a proof of concept to make sure I can, one, the siphon functions on the return line and I can suck out of this jar, and two, to make sure it doesn't affect my minimum pressure by restricting my return line back to the tank. 8. That's, of course, it's a weird size on that guy. All right, so there it is installed. Let's snug that just a tad, just to make sure the best chance of all this working properly. Alright, now I'm going to hook up my siphon line to it. Again, I got a adapter here for the OEM line, so it's still quick connect push lock. And I will drop this back in. And turn it back on. Alright, so I'm definitely dumping out of my new siphon on the return line. Much stronger flow. Obviously there's a lot more, it's 100% of the volume coming back through right now. And I'm at high pressure, right? So I should have a suction on this. Oh, I definitely do. I don't know if you can hear that. I can hear and feel the suction. But let me drop it down. I don't need it at that high of pressure. So I want to make sure it's not restricting flow, right? So if my return line is restricted, it's going to affect my minimum pressure. So I'm going to watch as I lower pressure and make sure nothing looks out of the ordinary. So great, I'm down to 30. Looking great so far. Normally operating the car under vacuum, that's about as low as we're going to see. I know it'll go down there no problem. If it hits 20, I'm going to be ecstatic. Easily regulates down to 20. So I know that nozzle is big enough to not restrict my return line and cause this to have higher pressure than I should. Alright. And then I'm going to up it to 40. And I'm going to do the functional test of this siphon tube at 40. I don't know if the camera's going to pick that up, but I can hear the vacuum. Let's put her in the jar and see what she does. Let me set this down. Ah! You didn't hear that. Trying to get as close to the bottom as I can. It is clearly sucking fluid out. Now it's getting airbound. But it's got a self-prime, right? It creates a vacuum. It's got to pull all the air through, and then it starts pulling the liquid. Now I'm having to turn it to get the last little bit. So even it's not dripping much, and I can hear the vacuum it's creating. It's good. So I know the siphon will still pull full, in the saddle tank it will still pull fuel over from the other side. So I'm having a hard time getting all the way to the bottom. But there you go. That jar was half full when I started. And then, so the siphon works. Alright, so that's it for part one. I got the flow data. I know my siphon works in the return line. I know I can regulate down to 20 psi. So it's not causing too much of a restriction in my return line. So I'm going to end this video here. And in the next video we'll come back. I'm going to remove that hat that I have in there now. I'm going to completely delete this dump, the OEM dump. And I'm going to leave that in the return line. I'm going to see what kind of performance and amperage effect I have from removing my venturi from the supply side over to the return side. And again, this is only possible on a return setup. On the OEM returnless setup, you have to run this in the supply side, unfortunately. So this is another pro that you can have on a return system. So yeah, end of part one. Check out part two if you want to see the final results.